Roswell has had its fair share of uncertain events, but the entire community wasn't prepared for what it experienced when two of its beloved teenagers went missing and eventually turned up dead.
I just drove around the Publix over here at Kings Plaza, and there looked like two bodies were laying behind the store.
The Roswellian police knew it had a dangerous criminal to apprehend, but wasn't sure of the kind of sick mind they were seeking for. Why did this killer put an end to the lives of two beloved teenagers? Was it premeditated? On the 1st of August 2016, while out on his daily delivery job, a driver's attention was drawn to some gruesome images. It was the bodies of two lifeless teenagers with fatal gunshot wounds to their heads and without their clothing. Soon, the police arrived, cordoning off the areas even as preliminary investigations began. They were soon met by anxious parents who had equally come seeking their kids who had gone missing the previous night. Unfortunately, these parents soon found out that their kids will never return to them, as they identified the bodies of the slain kids as theirs. The teenagers were Natalie Henderson and Carter Davis. Upon further CCTV examination, the cops found a strange man in a mask tailing the two teenagers who had been hanging out. The masked man eventually approached them and after some confrontation shot them in cold blood. Although the crime had been established, the police were left with the puzzle of identifying the culprit. Soon, they found phony credit card transactions in Natalie's bank statement, even though she was already dead. The police tracked down the card user to a gas station, where they found a half-naked young man by the name of Jeffrey Hazelwood acting in a rather erratic manner. He was soon arrested and taken in for interrogation. While alone in the holding room, Jeffrey appeared to be having a nervous breakdown. He continued to shake his hand in what appeared to be ticking hands. Soon, he is joined by Detective Burnett, who speaks in a manner to calm him down. As Jeffrey speaks, his words are pretty much a combination of ramblings and unclear speaking. He also talks about his girlfriend, Kelsey Bonham.
Tell me your wife's name.
Kelsey.
Kelsey?
Bonham.
Bonham? Okay, so you guys don't have the same last name?
We got married in our religion.
Okay.
Well, not legally, but to us it is.
In another interviewing room, Kelsey is brought in for some questioning. She comes in with her mother, as she is hard of hearing. The detective soon begins to ask some preliminary questions and touches on the duration of her relationship with Jeffrey. Kelsey says that they had known each other for only 5 months. It is also quite obvious that Kelsey's mother never approved of her relationship with the young man. He later asks if Jeff had any religious affiliations that promoted spirit or animal guides, and Kelsey says he had a hawk and wolf, two predatory animals.
Does he believe in that sort of stuff? Mm-hmm. He does? Did he have one?
Mm-hmm.
Well, what is it?
He has 2 of them.
Oh, yeah.
The hawk and the wolf.
What did he have with the hawks?
I will say every time when he felt safe, he did look up maybe a hawk.
Interesting.
A careful study of her body language reveals that she might be holding on to more information than she is letting on. The detective asks about Jeffrey's fidgety nature, and she denies him ever being fidgety or anxious. This is not in any way true, as we see from his interview with Barnett that he tics and acts all shaky when he is anxious. The detective also asks if Jeffrey carries a weapon.
Have you ever seen him carrying a firearm or have one in the car at all?
Never.
Kelsey says he carries a knife sometimes, but not a firearm. The detective then asks for her phone, and she appears hesitant to oblige. She is within her rights to deny the authorities access to her phone, as it likely contains private and personal information about her. Her mother, who is by her side, impresses on her to let the police take a look at the phone. Back in Jeffrey's room, he continues to tell her about what happened on that day and then suddenly mentions something that sets the ball rolling in the right direction. He speaks about finding a firearm lying around on the floor.
It was a gun.
He tells her that he picked up the loaded firearm as he believed someone left it there and began to play with it until he hurt his pinky finger. He appears quite playful as he tells her his story, almost like an innocent child for someone who is a suspect. At this point, Burnett tells him that she doesn't believe that he found the gun lying behind the gas station as he claims. It turns out that Burnett already has information about a missing gun, as reported by Jeffrey's grandfather.
Your grandfather's stolen gun is going to be in the back of your car, isn't it?
I don't know.
As the questions seem to heat up, Jeffrey reverts to his fetal position and eventually mentions another shocking revelation. He talks about a second possible suspect called Matt. He also mentions giving the gun to Matt. However, that is all that comes up about this possible new lead. Barnett seems to recognize that she might not get any more useful answers from Jeffrey and tries to make him face up to his crimes. She shows him some of the gruesome pictures of Natalie and asks if he would want the same thing to happen to Kelsey.
If this was Kelsey's picture, and they shot her, and they laid her out naked on the ground, and they spread her legs open, and they touched her, what happens to that person that does that?
Like that at all?
She also asks how he would expect such a person who committed such a heinous crime against Kelsey to be punished. Jeffrey breaks down, saying the word bad over and again, even as Barnett leaves the room. Meanwhile, in Kelsey's room, a new detective takes over the interview. He begins by asking Kelsey to tell him the whole truth and everything she knew about her boyfriend. Kelsey appears to be having a hard time speaking freely about her boyfriend, as she believes she might end up betraying him
I could betray. I don't like betraying people in a way.
if she lets the cops in on some of his behavioral traits. At this point, she asks her mother to leave the room, as she gets ready to tell the cops something about Jeffrey. She tells the detective about Jeffrey's attempts to end his life on 3 separate occasions, and how she rescued him on these occasions but never bothered to call 911 services.
Okay, so did you call rescue?
The detective appears to be quite accusatory and doesn't let up on his questioning methods. Soon, he asks her if Jeffrey ever mentioned hurting anyone, and Kelsey denies this.
So he hasn't told you that he's hurt anybody recently?
No, yeah, I did.
With the detective's insistence, Kelsey soon breaks down as she tries to convince the detective that she knows nothing about Jeffrey's possible crimes. Eventually, she shocks the detective when she asks if all of her interrogations have anything to do with the Roswell incident. The detective is quite taken aback and tries to make her believe that it is not, and that he is simply asking her about her boyfriend, but she is convinced that it has everything to do with the Publix incident because her mother had told her about it. At this point, the detective has to leave the room to attend to something, and Kelsey's mother comes in. She encourages her daughter to tell the cops the truth about what she knows and to hold nothing back. When the detective returns this time, Kelsey tells him about some violent, psychotic episodes that Jeffrey had. She had to take a knife from him in one case as he became quite suicidal.
I have to do coming on, and I stayed with him for 2 hours. He got in trouble with it. And he had
In his many dark episodes, he speaks about hearing voices in his head asking him to hurt people and also himself. He also wrote about some of his travails and the many voices in his head, telling him to do these terrible things. It turns out that Jeffrey had a terrible mental challenge, and Kelsey didn't deem it fit to have him institutionalized. She was a nursing major and really felt she could manage the situation, which was rapidly deteriorating and becoming quite an overwhelming challenge to deal with. In Jeffrey's room, he demanded to speak with Barnett again. Her motherly, calm, and quiet, welcoming conversational tone might have made him willing to tell her more about the things that happened on that fateful day. When Barnett returns to the room, Jeffrey begins to tell her about Matt, the same person he mentioned in his first encounter with the detective. Jeffrey tells her that he and Matt met at some point and soon got to know themselves a bit. One day, he met Matt and stops over to say hi to him. Matt asks for a ride, and he obliges him. On the way, Matt asks for his driver's license, and although this is weird, he gives in and hands the document over to Matt.
He made me show him my driver's license.
Almost immediately, a spiral of events that will eventually lead to the sad event involving two teenagers begins to unravel. Jeffrey says that Matt tells him to do whatever he asks him to, as now he had his name and details. He also threatens to hurt his family and Kelsey if he fails to do his bidding.
And he threatened me. He threatened my family, which was Kelsey.
Jeffrey is terrified about losing Kelsey or seeing her hurt and promises to do whatever Matt wants from him. Matt then tells him about Natalie and insists she must lose her life. With sufficient pressure and threats to his family and Kelsey, Jeffrey decides to carry out the dastardly act. On that fateful day, he drives Matt around Roswell High School a couple of times until they eventually see Natalie's car. In the car is also another person, Carter. Acting upon Matt's instruction, and with the stolen pistol, Jeffrey goes to the car and opens the door, ordering Carter out. When Carter comes out, he knocks him over the head and looks to Matt to see if that would satisfy him, but it doesn't. He wants more. Carter rises from the floor after being hit on the head, and soon he and Natalie are shooting at Matt.
Yelling to me, how much craziness, head.
And asking why he is doing what he's doing. Without warning, he opens fire at Carter, thus ending his life. At this point, he panics and says he closes his eyes, but soon hears more gunshot sounds and discovers that Natalie has also been shot. Jeffrey's confessional seems like a good way to wrap the case, except that a few questions remain. One of them, most importantly, is how and when he stole the pistol. In Kelsey's interview room with the detective, she finally reveals the missing puzzle that begins to put all of the pieces together.
He has schizophrenia.
It turns out that Jeffrey had an acute case of schizophrenia. Upon searching his apartment, books on the mental case were found by the cops there. Kelsey also revealed that Jeffrey had been off his medication at the time, leading to his ending the innocent lives of the teenagers. The detectives soon carried out further CCTV investigations and shockingly discovered that there was no one with Jeffrey on the day of the incident. All of his information about Matt were figments of his broken mind. Jeffrey was treated until he could stand trial. And was eventually sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole on the 17th of May, 2017. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to see more stories on true crime, then be sure to subscribe to our channel. This way, you'll be notified every single time we upload new videos. Thank you for watching.